welcome back to another dev vlog. This is number 20. I had a little issue last week. YouTube removed my channel for some reason, probably because I have 0 views because I'm so bad at making videos. I'm going to try to change it up a little bit, probably try to put a little bit more effort into production value, just a tiny little bit, and maybe use my editor to kind of shorten it down a little bit, and maybe do like a YouTube short, just cut out the good parts for like a YouTube short, something like that. So just a little bit more effort on the video production front. But I'll get right into it. So this week, Monday and Tuesday, I was working on making the main menu screen into a VR screen, kind of like how I did with the pause screen. So I had to kind of take this and do the same, give it the same treatment as I did with the pause menu, take it out of the 2D mode and put it into the world space so the VR can interact with it. So my initial pass at it, I was having a lot of issues, but I was able to eventually get the interaction set up again. Just a bunch of small issues like fixing sound, and I think my main problem with my approach was I was trying to put a VR menu, this canvas, this main menu, and also a copy of the 2D menu as well into the same scene. Now that kind of works with the pause menu because you can start with the pause menu inactive, and as soon as it becomes active, it initializes and loads correctly. The way the third party actually structured this main menu, if you have a copy of this in the scene, you have to load the scene where these menus are both active, and then you have to shut them down. But the problem with that is they use singletons. So their architecture is assuming that you only have one in the scene. So I was having 2 act at the same time, and I was getting a whole bunch of weird issues that I had to get into the code and figure out what was going on. Because it's depending on the order whichever one was awoken first, it would reset the singleton instance, and the audio manager and the controller manager was getting all messed up. I couldn't figure out what was going on. That took some work to figure out, pretty much. So got that working, and so then I was able to do get the both of the 2D and the VR main menu cycles working. So I'll go ahead and demo that now. Okay, so here it is in VR mode. I got the controllers working, the interaction, and you can press any key to start. The actual pointing works, and then also it detects the XR controller, so you can move and navigate the menu with your joystick button. All the buttons had to test and make sure everything's working. So, and you can use the grip buttons as the shoulder buttons, and yeah, it's looking pretty good. I think for initial pass, there's some polish to be done, but I think you can go back and all that, but we'll continue. So it loads into the scene, no problem. There's your pause menu again, still working the same as ever. Okay, I just noticed the joystick's not working. Oh, it works the second time around. I gotta mark that down. But yeah, it should be able to navigate with the joystick I'll make a note of that. I always find bugs in these demos, but anyways, so we'll go full cycle. I got it working again for 2D and the VR menu because I want to support the 2D menu, but we will go full cycle here, test the death here, and it brings up the menu screen. I want to add some polish to where it kind of clips to like a certain area, so you're not seeing the whole thing around here. But that works, and then it goes full cycle back to the beginning of the screen. So that's all looking good. All the audio and everything like that's working. So on Wednesday, after I finished working on the full cycle, the VR menus and the 2D menus, I wanted to move on to adding a loading screen in between from when I go from the main menu to the in-game scene. Right now, it just kind of, as you saw, it just kind of freezes until it loads, so it's a synchronous load. Um, and I bought a package with these cool loading screens. I kind of wanted to add a new loading screen and customize it to my liking. I started experimenting and diving into the features of this advanced scene manager package I bought. Initially, I just bought it for being able to load conveniently profiles for builds, different sets of builds without having to add them in one by one. Um, but it has a lot more features, and its main purpose is actually to manage the actual loading process and managing the scenes throughout the entire game project. So I spent some time looking into the documentation. It's not just a simple tool. So I looked at the documentation and looked at the demos to kind of figure out what features does this have that I can use in order to do a loading screen. I looked at all my tools and kind of that I had, and kind of I was looking at top-down engine. They have a scene manager for overall global game management, but I'd have to use the entire engine, which I didn't want to do. It's TDE has always been kind of you know kind of basic, so but this one is just this scene managers is fully featured and just focuses on doing scene management. Um, so the other tool I had, the loading scene studio, that's just for making loading screens and stuff. That's not really a scene manager. And then I have the SECTR tool, but that's not really scene management. That's something else. That's like scene individual scene optimization and performance. So it was interesting. I'll get back to SECTR later, but um, as I was going through um, and I was learning how to use this scene manager, I was using the demo, and I was basically able to set up. Um, I was basically able to follow their example and set up a loading process that would show a splash screen and then fade out and then go to the menu screen, and you can select a button and it would load the first scene in, and it would show an intermediary loading screen in between a default loading screen. So I'll show that later. But while I was figuring that out, I kind of, instead of making my own custom loading screen, I kind of started to think about the overall process, thinking about the entire level loading structure of the game. The questions like how do I load levels? How how would a level be split up into different scenes? How would I manage that? How could I like manage a large scene and optimize it performance for performance? I was sitting down and thinking and visualizing, how other games do it. How would my, how would I handle scene optimization with my tools? So I was doing a lot of research and like coming up with a theory of how I would go about doing something like this, right? And basically came to some conclusions thinking about it. And I think the key in most of these games is like obstructions, right? You can't, if you can imagine you're looking out over a vast landscape, you can't really load every little fine detail of the town and below. So in certain situations, most games get around this by, if you're looking over a vast scene, you're not loading all the finer assets within the scene. You're um, you are pretty much just, when the view goes too far, like you're looking over a ridge, you have to, in that certain case, you have to use level of detail and imposters to kind of represent that instead of the actual in-game scene, because that would be too much in memory. So if you don't have an obstruction, you have to do that. But the key is obstruction. So when you're looking around, like you have to, like if you're in a room, you can't see into the next room, right? Thus, you don't have to have it presented on screen to be able to be viewed. Um, and mine is more of a top-down game, so I have to use things like a certain distance. There has to be like a fog line where you just can't see past it, where I can actually unload assets to keep memory down. Or if you go around a corner, you can't see the previous scene, things like that. So if I'm not utilizing some sort of obstruction line to kind of keep my scene management in line, it has the potential of needing to see way on down the line visually, since I'm high above in a top-down game. So I had to think of these concepts for the first time and really kind of understand how like a framework for what assets I can have loaded at one time, and kind of come up with a strategy for handling this sort of situation in the game, because I can't just, like I said before, I can't just load everything into the scene and then view it all. My game would slow down to a crawl. So thinking about strategy for performance and how you load scenes, and I kind of got a good understanding of the theory of it. Um, but how do I do this in practice? Well, I have to take these ideas and put them into a prototype, right? I have to have a system with my tools, and I have to create a system in order to load levels, load scenes, and looking at the tools, I eventually came to a kind of a strategy where, so the entire game is composed of levels, right? You have like level 1, level 2, level 3, and then each level is broken down further into scenes. You may have multiple scenes constituting an actual level. Okay, that's great. But what about a scene? Like you have a big scene, it's made up of a lot of components, You can't, how do you optimize that further? Well, I have a tool called SECTR. It allows you to chop up an individual scene into like sub scenes and employ on like runtime occlusion and culling. I'll demonstrate that later. Um, so I had a whole bunch of theory how to do that. So I sat down and began, my master plan, how to tie all these ideas together of my research, and to make an actual system out of it that a game can stand upon, that'll work correctly. So on Thursday, I began to test out the ASM, like I said before, and I got this working uh, to figuring out like how to do a basic example on my own to load things. So I will actually do a demo of that now. So I got this all set up, so now we can just actually hit play, and the scene manager will actually, it'll load an initial screen. You can do something there. It loads a black screen, and then you can tell it to say, so that if this is the app startup, it actually show the splash screen here, and it's all managing it. It's all managing the scene loading in the scene manager here. I didn't have to write any code to say, hey, show this, and then fade this out, and then show that, and then load this. It's all done in this scene manager tool if you set it up properly and configure it properly. So after that, the splash screen, it fades out, and then we have our menu. So I just took a placeholder menu here and wrote a little bit of testing code. If you select something, that'll fire off code interacting with the scene manager to say, hey, get this collection and get the scene, load only the scene that are not loaded automatically. If you don't, it'll load all the scenes in the collection. So I just said, okay, load the only scene that I set that's marked load automatically. So we'll do that here. And then it fades that out, and then it puts its own default loading screen in there. So no more frozen application while the next scene loads synchronously. Now we get a loading screen, and it's loading the other scenes asynchronously in the background. Here I can make my own loading screen eventually and put a nice little spinner and graphics or whatever, and then it opens up into the game. So this scene manager allows me to manage loading different scenes here and there throughout the game by interacting with the scene manager and just setting up the different collections. So you can have a collection for level 1 comprised of all the different scenes that comprise the level. And further on down with SECTR, you can actually chop up each of these scenes into sectors. So I'll talk about that more next. So on Friday, I started working with this SECTR package. Again, reading the docs and watching the videos on how to set up and test and get the demos working. I was able to get the demos working for both the functionality of SECTR streaming and SECTR visibility. And it's pretty cool. I was able, to get the SECTR occlusion culling working. It's a different system than Unity's occlusion culling, where you don't have to bake it. It kind of, since you're using these little sectors, it's able to occlude at runtime. So that was all working. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate what this is all about here. So basically we have a scene here, and you just build the regular scene, and then you define these bounds for each of these sectors, and you connect them together with portals, and then use this tool to pretty much export all the stuff, all the meshes and everything into their own sub-scenes pretty much. And once that's all taken care of, you're able to run the. So I was able, with a little work, I was able to get it working not with just a demo controller, but with my own game manager and player controller. So we'll go ahead and play this here. And so you can kind of get the idea of what it does here. It will load in basically where you are. It's looking for the camera, and you can see that it's only partially loaded in depending on where the player is. So the demo had like a third-person camera. I had to configure it to work with a top-down camera, but you can see as he moves around, you can see assets kind of culling, popping in and out, and also, so it, let's see here, it, stop, there you go. It will, as you move through, it'll load and unload seamlessly stuff to the sector. So this is a way you can actually break up um, different scenes, right? So the plan is to have like one scene, and each scene is broken up into sectors. And as you move through different sectors, it'll unload stuff that's either not seen by the camera or you're just too far away from it. It's, you know, it's streaming in and out of these assets. So you get far enough away, it'll not only be cold, but it'll just be unloaded. The sector will be unloaded. It's no longer these assets are no longer in memory. So this will really cut down, and the objective is now to when you hit a trigger, it'll load in the next the scene manager will load in the next scene, and it'll be like, you know, it'll work seamlessly in the background. So the next scene will load here once you hit the trigger. And then if you go far enough away, this whole scene will unload. So this whole scene with all these sectors, and it'll just go on to the next one. So that's kind of what I'm going for the design of the game. And of course, if you go back, everything starts to reload in. So it works backwards and forwards, and this system will really allow me to build a solid game on top of it without having to load a lot of stuff. Now these are just demo rooms. This is not what the game is going to look like. So these rooms will be a lot bigger and more detailed and all that. But the point is, when you're out of range of the room, it's going to get unloaded. So just to figure this system out and incorporate in the architecture is what I'm trying to go for here. So yeah, so it's like I was saying before, at the end of the day, I'm still in process, but now I'm trying to figure out how to, you know, copy this scene over and use the scene manager streaming to set up a trigger, so when you hit a certain point, it'll actually load in the next scene, and it's all connected. So I have this slick idea of testing out, like when the next scene is loading, it'll actually set the whole every object back to 0, 0 in one frame. You won't see a skip or a stutter, but that will stop you from running into the issue known as the floating point. The floating point issue. If you get too far away from world origin, the system has a hard time, and it starts to mess around with being actually being able to calculate proper meshes. So it's just a lot more testing, and this is the prototype, and to implement this prototype from start to finish, I can actually start to build a game on top of this with sectors, and then scenes, and then levels to make up a game. So that's where I'm going with this. So I'm going to be working on that next week. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll talk to you next week.